Hey students, today we're going to be looking at Romeo and Juliet Act 3 vocabulary. So there's a few vocabulary words that we're going to look for. First of all, you need to have your packets out because you're going to be writing these vocab words into your packets. Second thing you need to realize is I got these pages a little bit out of order in your books. So it's going to seem like the Act 3 vocabulary is actually after the Act 3 questions, but you need to know these words for Act 3. So you're going to be looking at page 26. So if you could all open up your books to page 26, that's the place where you want to be. On page 26 in the middle section, you can see the vocabulary words we're going to go through. So let's get right into it. Our first vocabulary word is allusion. And you're going to want to copy this word in. An allusion is a figure of speech in which an object or circumstance from history or mythology is referred to. It's left to the audience to make the direct connection. We did talk about allusion earlier this year, and if I want to remind you about when that was used during the letter from a Birmingham jail, and Dr. King referred to people from history like Martin Luther and Paul and other people when he was explaining people who've gone through a lot of stuff to get a job done. However, he talks about those people, but he doesn't give you any background knowledge. He just assumes you're going to know what happened to those people. Well, Shakespeare also uses allusions. And if you see underneath allusion, there's a place to write examples. Some examples of allusions in Romeo and Juliet that you've seen so far, maybe just didn't notice it. One time, Romeo was talking about Rosalind, and he said, she can't be hit with Cupid's arrow. And he just keeps going. Like we all know who Cupid is and what that arrow thing is talking about. Well, we probably all do, right? Cupid, of course, being from Greek mythology, where if he would hit someone with his arrow, that person would fall in love. Another place is in Act 2, where Juliet is talking to Romeo, and she's saying, Romeo, are you being true about promising to love me? I know if I ask you if you love me, you're going to say yes. But are you really being honest with me? Are you just playing? And at one point, Juliet makes the comment, she says, Jove laughs at lovers' promises. And Jove is another name for Zeus, the Greek god, the Greek ruler of the gods. And if you know anything about Zeus, he was famous for having affairs. So saying Jove laughs at promises means Jove thinks it's funny when people say they're in love but really aren't. The next vocab word we're going to look at right here is symbol. This is, again, a vocab word we have looked at before. A symbol is an object or an action that means something more than just its literal meaning. I'll give you two examples that you could put down. One is the rose. Romeo refers to and Juliet refer to roses oftentimes. Juliet talks when she's on the balcony. She's saying, hey, what's in a name? A rose would still be a rose if it wasn't called a rose. But the ironic thing and the symbolic meaning of a rose is, yes, roses are beautiful, like Romeo and Juliet's love is beautiful. But roses can also prick you. They also have thorns. They can also hurt. And I think that definitely is going to be true with Romeo and Juliet. Another example of a symbol is when we first meet Friar Lawrence. What is he doing? He's in his garden working with his plants and making his little potions and medicines and poisons that he makes, his little side job that he does. Well, Friar Lawrence even refers to poison, and he said, it's interesting about poison. Poison isn't evil by itself. It's only evil if someone makes it do an evil purpose. Again, poison is being a symbol because poison is going to definitely come into play later in Romeo and Juliet. All right, two more words. Our next one is climax. And again, this is part of a story. It is the most intense, exciting, or important part of a piece of literature. We are learning this term during Act 3 because one could argue the climax of Romeo and Juliet, in one respect, takes place in Act 3. Plays are sometimes a little bit different than a lot of other literature we're used to, where you're normally going to find the climax, the most exciting part, the part where the character either has to go one direction or the other direction. You're normally going to find that very close to the ending. However, a lot of times in Shakespearean plays or dramatic plays, The climax actually comes earlier, and that is true in Romeo and Juliet. We're going to find the climax of Romeo and Juliet at the end of Act 3. Kind of leading right into that, our next thing we have is dramatic structure. And this is the sequence that a 5-act play follows. There's 5 steps. Exposition, whereas you kind of lay the background out. We've already gotten that. Rising action, where more and more interesting events happen, more and more conflicts happen. And that's where we're in right now. Of course, there's more and more drama that keeps getting built every single act. And a whole bunch of extra things are going to happen here in Act 3. Then you have the climax, sometimes also known as the turning point. That's where the author, has to make it, or the character has to make a decision. Am I going to do this and make my life turn this way, or am I going to do that? And there's no turning back from a climax. Then you have the falling action. So once that character's made that fatal decision, what is going to occur because of it? That's the falling action. And in Romeo and Juliet, that's actually a pretty long section. And then the very last part is called the denouement. That's how you say that crazy French word there. Or you can call it the catastrophe. This always happens in a tragic play, and Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy. At the very end of the play, there's always a tragedy, something where you are going to learn a final lesson. So those are the different parts of the vocab for Act 3.